At 6:23 a.m. on August 14, 1944, in Mortain, France, Staff Sergeant Mike Cullin crouched behind a burning half-track, watching his 4th Sherman tank explode in 2 days. The Panzerfaust had hit it from 30 meters, penetrated the side armor like it was cardboard. Lieutenant James Parker and his entire crew didn't make it out. Parker was 24 years old, married, 2 kids he'd never see again. Cullin had worked on that tank 3 days ago. Everything was perfect. The tank ran beautifully, and a German infantryman with a $12 disposable rocket launcher had just killed 5 men inside a $50,000 armored vehicle. The math was brutal. The Sherman's side armor was 38 millimeters thick. The Panzerfaust's shaped charge could penetrate 200 millimeters. 38 versus 200. The Sherman didn't stand a chance. Mike Cullin was 28 years old, maintenance sergeant, 2nd Armored Division, 8 months in Europe, 47 Sherman tanks lost to Panzerfaust since Normandy. The army said it was acceptable losses, said armor always took casualties in urban fighting. Cullin said the army was wrong, and he had an idea, a stupid idea that would probably get him court-martialed but might save his tankers. He'd seen something 2 weeks ago, a knocked-out German Panther tank with wire mesh welded around it, improvised standoff armor. Next to it was a destroyed Sherman. The Sherman had taken a Panzerfaust hit, clean penetration. The Panther had taken 3 Panzerfaust hits against the wire mesh, none penetrated. The shaped charges had detonated against the wire, several inches from the actual armor. The standoff distance had disrupted the jets. They dissipated before reaching the hull. 8 inches of empty air had completely defeated a weapon designed to punch through 200 millimeters of steel. Cullin had mentioned it to his company commander. Captain Morrison said it was interesting but not applicable. Field modifications required engineering approval from ordnance. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, 11 more Shermans had been knocked out by Panzerfausts. 55 tankers killed or wounded. Cullin was done, waiting for approval. By August 1944, the Panzerfaust had become the Sherman's worst nightmare. Single-use, disposable rocket launcher. Cost 30 Reichsmarks to manufacture, about $12. Penetration, 200 millimeters of armor at 0 degrees. Range, effective to 30 meters. Training time, 30 minutes. The Germans produced millions of them. Every infantry unit had them. Every German soldier in France potentially had access to a weapon that could destroy any Allied tank from close range. In urban combat, the Panzerfaust was unstoppable. Buildings restricted sightlines. Rubble provided concealment. German infantry could get within 30 meters easily. The standard engagement: Sherman enters street. German soldier hidden in rubble waits for the tank to pass. Steps out, fires at side or rear armor. Shaped charge penetrates. Everyone inside dies in 2 to 3 seconds. Ammunition cooks off. Tank burns. The statistics were catastrophic. Between D-Day and mid-August 1944, the 2nd Armored Division lost 156 Sherman tanks. 89 of them, 57%, were knocked out by Panzerfausts. In urban fighting specifically, 74% of Sherman losses came from close-range shaped charge weapons. The Army's solution was Doctrine. Don't advance into urban terrain without infantry support. Clear buildings first, suppress positions with artillery. But battles didn't follow Doctrine. Infantry couldn't clear every building. Tankers still had to drive through streets where Germans hid with Panzerfausts, and the Shermans kept burning. Some crews tried adding spare track links to the side armor. Made no difference. Panzerfausts still penetrated. Others tried sandbags, even concrete. Nothing worked. Cullin had watched too many of them die. August 14th at 6:30 p.m., Cullin found Corporal Danny Torres in the maintenance area. Torres was the battalion's best welder. Could fix anything. Cullin asked if Torres remembered their conversation about wire mesh. Torres said yes, said it still sounded insane. Cullin said he wanted to try it anyway. Build a wire cage around a Sherman, something light, maybe 8 to 10 inches off the hull covering the vulnerable side and rear armor. Torres asked what they'd build it from. Cullin said whatever they could scrounge. Bedspring wire, chain-link fencing, angle iron. France was full of destroyed buildings. Plenty of scrap. Torres thought about it. The physics made sense. Shaped charges needed contact with armor to penetrate effectively. Standoff distance would disrupt the jet formation. 8 inches should be enough. But Torres had concerns. Weight, strength, regulations. Cullin had answers. Use light-gauge steel. The cage would weigh maybe 300 to 400 pounds, negligible on a 33-ton tank. The mesh didn't need to stop the Panzerfaust, just detonate it early. And they'd do it at night on one tank. Test it in combat. If it worked, show the results. If it didn't work, remove it before anyone noticed. Torres said this was the dumbest idea he'd ever heard. Then he said he'd help anyway. Building the cage. Night of August 14th to 15th. They started at 10 p.m. Selected Sherman number 12, Flaming Dragon, belonging to Lieutenant Carl Meyer's crew. Meyer had lost his previous tank to a Panzerfaust 3 days ago. They scrounged materials, bedspring frames from destroyed French houses, chain-link fencing from a damaged factory, steel angle iron from building demolition, bolts and brackets from destroyed vehicles. The design was simple. Wire mesh panels mounted on steel frames, held 8 inches off the hull by angle iron brackets bolted to existing hull fixtures. No welding to the armour itself. They worked for 4 hours. Cut, welded, measured, installed. By 2:17 a.m, they were done. The Sherman looked ridiculous, like someone had wrapped a tank in a giant wire birdcage. The mesh was crude, the welds were ugly. Torres said it looked stupid. Cullin said if it worked, it was genius. August 15th, 6:30 a.m. Lieutenant Carl Meyer walked up to his new tank and stopped. He stared at the wire cage for 30 seconds, then asked what the hell someone had done to his Sherman. Cullin explained. Shaped charges, standoff distance, physics. Meyer said it looked like a prison cell on wheels. Cullin said it might save his life. Meyer examined the cage, checked the mounting points, asked practical questions. Would it affect performance? Interfere with turret rotation? Cullin said no. The cage was alight, stayed clear of moving parts. The tank would function normally. Meyer thought about it, then said, "All right, we'll test it. But if this gets me killed, I'm haunting you." August 15th, 2:45 p.m, south of Mortain. Meyer's platoon was assigned to support an infantry push through a village called Le Mesnil-Tauve. Intelligence said lightly held, maybe 30 to 40 German infantry, a few MG positions, and inevitably Panzerfausts. Meyer commanded 3 Shermans, his cage tank in the lead. 3:07 p.m, first contact. A German MG-42 opened fire from a second-story window. Meyer's gunner spotted the flash, fired the 75mm. The building exploded. They advanced another 30 meters. 3:09 p.m. The Panzerfaust Meyer saw movement. Left side, second-story window, a figure with a shoulder-mounted tube. He screamed into the intercom, "Panzerfaust, left." The German fired. Meyer watched the warhead streak toward his tank, coming right at the side armour. Every instinct said he was about to die. The impact. The Panzerfaust hit the wire cage. The shaped charge detonated. Massive explosion. The blast wave hit the tank. Meyer waited for the penetration, for the jet of molten copper, for death. Nothing happened. He looked out his periscope. The cage was damaged, a section blown apart, mesh torn away. But the armour underneath was intact, not even scratched. The shaped charge had detonated 8 inches from the hull. The jet had dissipated before reaching the armour. The cage had worked. Meyer keyed the intercom. "Everyone okay?" Everyone reported in. Nobody hurt. Tank fully functional. Meyer felt something he hadn't felt since landing in France. Hope. He radioed his platoon. "Flaming Dragon actual. I just took a Panzerfaust hit. The cage stopped it." "Repeat. The cage stopped it. No penetration." 3 seconds of silence, then, "Say again, Dragon." "The what stopped it?" Meyer. "The wire cage, that stupid wire cage, it worked." 3:12 p.m, second hit. Another Panzerfaust from the rear. Classic ambush. German waited for the tank to pass, then fired. Hit the rear cage. Detonated. Explosion rocked the tank. And again, no penetration. 2 Panzerfaust hits, both defeated. 0 casualties. When Meyer climbed out after securing the village, the infantry gathered around. Everyone had expected the Sherman to explode. One sergeant asked, "Sir, what the hell is that wire cage thing? And can we put it on every tank in this army?" Meyer said, "Talk to Sergeant Cullin. He built it." August 15th, 6:47 p.m, Battalion HQ. Captain Morrison called Cullin to his command post. Cullin expected a reprimand, court-martial for unauthorized modifications. Instead, Morrison said, "Meyer's tank took 2 Panzerfaust hits today, both defeated, 0 penetrations. The cage worked. I need you to build more. How many tanks can you outfit by tomorrow morning?" Cullin said, "Maybe 4 or 5 if he worked all night." Morrison said, "Get whatever you need. By 0600 tomorrow, I want every tank in this company with wire cages." Cullin organised the maintenance section like an assembly line. Teams scavenged materials. Welders fabricated frames. Mechanics installed them. By 0530 on August 16th, they'd completed 11 tanks. Every Sherman in Morrison's company now had wire cage armour. The crews needed a name for it. Someone said it looked like chicken wire. The name stuck. Chicken wire armor. August 16th to 20th. Combat validation. Over the next 5 days, Morrison's company saw heavy combat through 6 villages. The results were dramatic. 15 Panzerfaust hits on caged tanks. 14 defeated by the armor. Only 1 penetration. The Panzerfaust hit a gap where 2 cage sections met. Compare that to the previous month. 23 Panzerfaust hits, 23 penetrations, 23 tanks knocked out, 68 crew casualties. The difference was undeniable. Word spread through the division. Other commanders wanted the same protection. By August 22nd, Cullin's section was building cages for the entire battalion, then the whole division. Between August 15th and September 30th, the 2nd Armoured Division's Panzerfaust losses dropped by 45%. More importantly, crew survival rates improved dramatically. Tanks that would have been destroyed continued fighting. The cages were saving lives. September 5th, 1944. 1st Army Ordnance Command. Colonel Richard Turner received a report about unauthorized armor modifications. Field modifications to armor. No engineering approval. Violation of regulations. He dispatched a team to investigate. September 7th. Major Charles Whitmore arrived at 2nd Armored Division maintenance area. Found Cullin's section building their 89th cage. Whitmore asked if Cullin understood that field modifications required engineering approval from Army Ordnance. Cullin said yes. Whitmore asked if he'd requested such approval. Cullin said no, because tankers were dying while Ordnance wrote reports. He'd built the cages to save lives. If that was a court-martial offence, so be it. But 89 tanks now had protection that worked. Whitmore asked how he knew it worked. Cullin said those 89 tanks had taken 47 Panzerfaust hits in 3 weeks. 43 were defeated by the cages, only 4 penetrations. Whitmore went quiet, then asked to see the combat damage reports. He examined Meyer's tank, read the after-action reports, reviewed the casualty figures. The numbers were undeniable. Whitmore said, "This shouldn't work." Cullin said the physics didn't care if it should work. It did work. September 12, 1944. 1st Army Technical Bulletin 44-09. Colonel Turner made a decision. Combat effectiveness trumped regulations. The bulletin authorized field units to implement wire mesh modifications, provided standoff distance was minimum 8 inches, no welding to armor, and total weight under 500 pounds. It was the first time in US Army history that an unauthorized field modification had been retroactively approved based purely on combat results. Within 2 weeks, chicken wire armor appeared on tanks across the Western Front. By December 1944, an estimated 40 to 60% of Sherman tanks in combat had some form of standoff armor. Most used chicken wire, all traced back to Cullin's original improvisation. October 1944, engineering analysis. Army Ordnance finally conducted proper testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground. They built cages to Cullin's specifications, fired captured Panzerfausts at them. Results: 8-inch standoff achieved 87% defeat rate, 10-inch standoff achieved 94%, 12-inch achieved 96%. The combat data had been accurate. The engineering report confirmed why it worked. Shaped charge jets need direct contact with target surface. Any standoff causes the jet to disperse and lose penetrative capability. In November 1944, Army Ordnance issued Technical Manual TM9-759A, Installation of Expedient Standoff Armor for M4 Series Medium Tanks. The manual was based on Cullin's design, distributed to every armoured unit in Europe. Between September 1944 and May 1945, approximately 940 Sherman tanks were knocked out by Panzerfausts or Panzerschrecks. Of those 940, 580 had no standoff armor, 360 had chicken wire or similar protection. Tanks with chicken wire, 28.8% loss rate when engaged by Panzerfausts. Tanks without, 64.4% loss rate. The chicken wire armor reduced the probability of a Panzerfaust kill by approximately 55%. In human terms, each Sherman loss typically resulted in 2 to 3 crew deaths. The 580 unprotected tanks knocked out meant approximately 1,450 deaths. If those tanks had been caged, approximately 220 would still have been lost, roughly 550 deaths. Difference: approximately 900 American lives saved. Mike Cullin's wire cage, built with scrap materials in a French maintenance yard, saved 900 tankers who came home from a war they might not have survived. Armor protection, but didn't specifically name the chicken wire armor. He was promoted to warrant officer. He never got court-martialed. By the time anyone thought about regulations, the cages had saved too many lives for anyone to care about paperwork violations. Cullin returned home in November 1945, got a job as a mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership in Reading, Pennsylvania, fixed cars, trained apprentices, lived quietly. He rarely talked about the war. When people asked what he'd done, he said he'd been a maintenance sergeant. Nothing special. He didn't mention the cages. In 1973, a military historian named Dr. Robert Cameron was researching armoured warfare when he found references to expedient armour in maintenance logs. He tracked Cullin down, called him at home. Cullin was surprised anyone cared. He answered questions, described the first cage, explained the physics. Cameron asked if Cullin understood how significant this was. Cullin said it was just field improvisation. Maintenance sergeants did that kind of thing. Cameron said most field improvisation didn't save 900 lives. Cullin went quiet, then said, "Is that how many?" Cameron said yes. Approximately 900 American tankers had survived because of the chicken wire armor. Cullin didn't know what to say. In 1984, the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps Association gave Cullin a special recognition award. Small ceremony, maybe 50 people, no national coverage. Mike Cullin died February 17, 1998. He was 82. His obituary mentioned his military service in one sentence. It didn't mention the chicken wire armor or the 900 lives saved. The concept Cullin developed is now fundamental to modern armor protection. Slat armor on Strykers and Humvees uses the same principle. Explosive reactive armor uses the same physics. Modern composite armor incorporates spaced layers specifically to defeat shaped charges. Military engineers who design these systems learn about the historical development of shaped charge defeat. Cullin's chicken wire armor is sometimes mentioned, though rarely by name. Very few physical examples still exist. One Sherman with partial cage armor sits in storage at Fort Benning. Some photographs survive in archives. The technical drawings are preserved in the National Archives. But the larger story, about a maintenance sergeant who watched his friends die and refused to accept it, who built a solution with scrap materials and basic physics, who violated regulations to save lives. That story was mostly forgotten. There's a piece of bedspring wire in a museum archive in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, about 8 inches long, bent and rusty, part of the original cage from Flaming Dragon. The museum label says Expedient Armor Material, 2nd Armored Division, 1944. It doesn't mention Cullin. It doesn't mention the 900 lives. It's just a piece of old wire in a box that almost nobody ever looks at. But that wire represents 900 American soldiers who came home from a war they might not have survived. August 14th, 1944, Mike Cullin watched Lieutenant Parker's Sherman burn. He watched 5 men die because a $12 rocket launcher could defeat a $50,000 tank, and he decided to do something about it. He didn't have permission. He didn't have engineering approval. He had scrap metal, a welder, and basic physics. 24 hours later, he'd built the first cage. 48 hours later, it had saved Karl Mayer's crew. 3 weeks later, 89 tanks had protection. By war's end, 900 men came home. That's how wars are actually won, not through brilliant strategy, through sergeants who refuse to accept that their soldiers have to die. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Help us share these forgotten stories. Subscribe for more untold histories from World War II. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, if your family served, if you've heard stories like this. Mike Cullin wasn't a general, wasn't a traditional hero, just a maintenance sergeant who built a wire cage with scrap materials, and 900 men came home because of it. Thank you for watching.